What happens when two of music's biggest stars clash over a deeply personal topic that hits too close to home? What followed was one of the most emotionally charged moments in daytime television history, an interview between Tim McGraw and Kelly Clarkson that began as a simple conversation about music, but soon spiraled into raw honesty and shared pain. Kelly sat across from Tim in her brightly lit studio, her warm smile setting a comfortable tone as the cameras rolled. Tim, dressed in a crisp black button-down shirt with his cowboy hat resting on the side table, appeared relaxed, at least at first. The talk began with light promotion for his new album, but as Kelly's questions dug deeper, the atmosphere shifted. "So, Tim, your new album really explores themes of family and legacy," Kelly began with her signature blend of curiosity and empathy. "There's this recurring message about fathers and the impact they have on their children. What inspired you to go so deep this time around?" Tim clasped his hands, pausing thoughtfully before responding. "You know, Kelly, becoming a father changes everything. When you hold that baby for the first time, you realize you're not just keeping them safe, you're shaping who they'll become. Every word, every action matters." Kelly nodded, clearly moved. "That's beautiful," she said softly. "But you've been open about your own father's absence growing up. How did that shape the kind of father you wanted to be?" For a moment, the question hung in the air. Tim's jaw tightened. "My father. He had his demons," he said slowly. "Baseball was his life, and when that dream died, a part of him did too. He wasn't around much, and when he wasn't really present. I learned early that I didn't want to be that kind of man." Kelly leaned forward gently. "That must have been incredibly difficult as a child. Do you think that pain is what drives you to be so present with your daughters?" Tim's eyes grew distant, his tone turning heavier. "Every single day, Kelly, I make a choice to show up because I know what it feels like when someone doesn't. I know what it's like to wonder if you're worth staying for." The studio went silent, except for the low hum of the cameras. Kelly's expression softened. "I understand that feeling more than you might think," she said quietly. "The wondering, the questioning your own worth based on someone else's inability to stay." Tim looked up, surprised. "Your father?" he asked gently. Kelly nodded. "He left when I was 6. Just gone one day. My mom did everything she could, but a father's absence leaves a specific kind of hole, doesn't it?" Tim's voice was low, filled with recognition. "It does. It's like you spend your life trying to prove you're worthy of love, even though deep down, you know their leaving wasn't your fault." Kelly's eyes shimmered, though she kept her composure. "I thought I'd worked through all of that, years of therapy, success, having my own kids, but sometimes out of nowhere that little girl who felt abandoned resurfaces. When my divorce was finalized, when I was fighting for custody, when I had to explain to my kids why their family was changing, suddenly I was 6 again, wondering if I was to blame." "You weren't," Tim said firmly, "and neither was I. We were just kids, Kelly. Children don't control the choices adults make." Kelly smiled sadly. "I know that up here," she said, tapping her temple. "But knowing and feeling are two different things, aren't they?" "They are," Tim agreed quietly. "That's why this album mattered to me. I needed to explore those emotions to understand how my father's choices shaped me, not just wounded me." Kelly exhaled deeply, admiration clear in her voice. "That's incredibly brave, Tim. Most people never confront that pain so openly." Tim smiled faintly. "Music's always been my therapy. And if sharing my story helps someone else feel less alone in their pain, then it's worth it." Kelly hesitated, a flicker of conflict in her eyes. "Can I ask you something that might be difficult to answer?" she said softly. Tim nodded, ready, unaware that her next question would change the tone of the conversation entirely. "Of course," Tim said quietly, leaning back in his chair. Kelly hesitated before asking, "Do you ever wonder if your father regretted his choices? If he thought about what he missed?" Tim's expression tightened, a shadow crossing his face. "Every day," he admitted, "especially now that he's gone. I'll never get to ask him why he couldn't stay, why baseball mattered more than his family. I'll never get to hear him say he was sorry, or that he was proud of me for becoming the man I am despite him not being there." Kelly's voice softened to a whisper. "That's the hardest part, isn't it? The questions that will never have answers." "It is," Tim agreed. "But I've learned you have to create your own closure. You have to forgive them not for their sake, but for yours. Because carrying that anger, that hurt, it only destroys you." Kelly blinked rapidly, her eyes shining. I'm still working on that part, she confessed. The forgiveness. Tim's voice gentled. It's not a destination, Kelly, it's a journey. Some days you think you've made peace with it all, and other days it hits you like it just happened. That's okay. That's human. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the weight of two people laid bare before each other and the world. Kelly wiped discreetly at her eyes, but Tim's expression shifted, something in him hardening. His voice changed, quieter but edged. You know what, Kelly? I have to be honest about something. Kelly looked up, startled. What do you mean? I've watched your show for a while, he said, leaning forward. And I've noticed something. You talk about your father's abandonment a lot in your interviews, your songs, even casual conversations. And I can't help but wonder, are you using that pain as a crutch? Kelly's face went pale. I'm sorry, what? I mean, Tim continued, his tone firm. At what point do you stop being a victim of your childhood and start taking responsibility for your own life? I dealt with my father's absence. I moved on. I didn't let it define every relationship I had afterward. Tim, Kelly said, her voice trembling, I don't think that's fair. Everyone processes trauma differently. Do they? He challenged. Or do some people just choose to stay stuck in it? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you've built your whole identity around being the girl whose daddy left. Your music, your interviews, even your divorce, you always circle back to that same story. That's not true, Kelly said, her voice breaking. My divorce had nothing to do with my father. Didn't it? Tim pressed. You married a man who was emotionally unavailable just like your father. And when it didn't work, instead of examining your own patterns, you blamed it on your childhood trauma. That's convenient, isn't it? Kelly shot to her feet, shaking. I can't believe you're saying this to me. You don't know anything about my marriage or my choices. I know enough, Tim replied, unmoved. You've been married, divorced, and now you're raising kids alone, doing exactly what you said you'd never do. Raising them without their father consistently around. Sound familiar? Tears welled in Kelly's eyes, anger mixing with heartbreak. How dare you compare my situation to my childhood? I didn't choose for my marriage to end. I didn't choose for my ex-husband to be difficult about custody. But you chose him, Tim said coldly. You chose someone who couldn't give you what you needed. And now you're making the same mistakes your father did, putting your career first, keeping your kids in the spotlight, moving them around for convenience. That's not what I'm doing, Kelly cried. Everything I do is for my children. Is it? Tim countered sharply. Or is it for your image, the strong single mom who overcame abandonment? It's a great story, Kelly. It sells records. It wins sympathy. It keeps people rooting for you. Kelly's tears spilled freely now, her composure gone. Stop it, please, just stop. But Tim didn't. You know what the difference is between you and me? He said. When my father left, I didn't spend the next 30 years talking about it. I didn't write songs about it. I didn't use it to excuse every failed relationship or bad decision. I grew up and moved on. That's not fair, Kelly sobbed. You don't get to tell me how to process my pain. And you don't get to use your trauma as a free pass for every mistake, Tim shot back. At some point, you have to own your choices. You have to stop being a victim and start being accountable. Kelly wiped at her tears, her voice barely audible. I thought you understood. I did, Tim said quietly. But understanding and enabling are two different things. Sometimes caring about someone means telling them the truth they don't want to hear. What truth? Kelly demanded, her voice rising again. That you're not special because your father left, Tim said bluntly. That happens to millions of kids, and most of them don't spend their whole lives defining themselves by it. You've turned your abandonment into your brand, Kelly, and it's pathetic. The word hit like a slap. Kelly recoiled, eyes wide and full of disbelief. Pathetic? She echoed. Yes, Tim said, his tone unflinching. You're a grown woman with talent, success, and two beautiful children who need you to be strong. Not stuck in your 6-year-old trauma. They deserve better than a mother who keeps reliving her pain for an audience. The studio was silent, the tension so thick it felt suffocating. The cameras kept rolling, capturing not just a clash of egos, but the collision of two deeply wounded souls, each convinced they were right. Kelly's tears were streaming freely now, her voice trembling with a mix of heartbreak and fury. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know how hard I've worked to be a good mother. Don't I? Tim's voice was sharp, almost cruel in its honesty. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're repeating the same patterns. Your kids are going to grow up with a mother who's physically present but emotionally unavailable, too busy being a victim to actually heal. Kelly pressed a trembling hand to her chest, struggling to breathe. I can't do this. Can't do what? Tim shot back. Can't handle the truth? This is exactly what I'm talking about. The moment someone challenges your narrative, you fall apart. How are you supposed to teach your children resilience when you've never learned it yourself? Kelly shook her head violently, her voice breaking. No, this isn't right. This isn't who you are. The Tim McGraw I know wouldn't be this cruel. The Tim McGraw you know, he said evenly, is a carefully constructed public image. But the real Tim McGraw believes in tough love. My father may have been absent, but I learned to be a man without him. I learned to be strong without using his absence as a crutch. That's the difference between us. Kelly's breathing grew uneven, her panic evident. I need you to stop talking, please. Why? Tim asked coldly. Because it's uncomfortable? Because it's forcing you to face something you don't want to face? This is your show, Kelly. You ask the tough questions. You push your guests to be vulnerable. But you can't handle it when someone does the same to you. Kelly looked around the studio, her eyes darting to the cameras, the crew, anywhere for an escape. This wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered. This was supposed to be about your album. My album is about growth, Tim replied calmly. About moving past childhood trauma and becoming the person you're meant to be. Maybe that's exactly what this conversation needs to be about, too. Kelly's voice came out small, almost childlike. I thought we were connecting. I thought you understood me. I did understand you, Tim said, his voice softening just slightly. That's why I'm telling you this. Because I see what you're doing to yourself and to your kids. Someone needs to care enough to tell you the truth, even if it hurts. Kelly stood trembling, her tears falling hard now. The room was silent except for her ragged breathing. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw but steady. You know what, Tim? You're right about one thing. I do talk about my father a lot, but you're wrong about everything else. Tim raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. Am I? Yes, you are, Kelly said, wiping her face, her voice gathering strength. You think I use my trauma as a crutch, but you don't understand why I talk about it. I talk about it because there are millions of people out there who feel exactly like I do. People who think they're broken because someone they loved abandoned them. Kelly, that's not the point I was making, Tim started, but she cut him off sharply. No, let me finish, she said, her tone firm now. You called me pathetic for not getting over it, but you know what's actually pathetic, Tim? A man who thinks strength means burying his pain so deep he can pretend it never existed. For the first time, Tim faltered. His expression softened, uncertainty flickering across his face. That's not what I do, isn't it? Kelly challenged. You just spent 20 minutes telling me I should stop talking about my father. But you've written an entire album about yours. You've done interviews about him, you've shared your story. But when I do the same thing, suddenly it's weakness. Tim opened his mouth to respond, but Kelly didn't let him. Her voice was fierce now. The tears no longer a sign of weakness, but of conviction. And you want to talk about my children? My kids know they're loved every single day. They know their mother fights for them, protects them, and yes, sometimes cries in front of them. Because that's what real people do. That's what honest people do. Kelly, I didn't mean to suggest, Tim began, but she cut him off again. You didn't mean to suggest what? She demanded. That I'm a bad mother? That I'm damaging my children by being open about my struggles? Because that's exactly what you said, and it's the cruelest thing anyone has ever said to me. Tim's confidence cracked, his tone uncertain now. I was trying to help you see something. Help me see what? Kelly snapped, her eyes blazing through her tears. That I should be ashamed of my pain? Kelly's tears were flowing freely now, her voice breaking as emotion overtook her composure. That I should pretend everything is fine when it's not? That I should lie to my children about the reality of life and relationships? She demanded, her words trembling between pain and fury. No, that's not what I meant, Tim said quietly, his tone softer now, but Kelly wasn't ready to let it go. Then what did you mean? She shot back, her frustration boiling over. Because what I heard was a man so terrified of his own emotions that he has to attack someone else for having the courage to feel them. Tim sat back in his chair, clearly taken aback. That's not fair, he murmured. Kelly gave a bitter, incredulous laugh. Fair? You just told me I'm pathetic, that I'm a bad mother, that I'm using my trauma as a marketing tool, and you want to talk about fair? Tim struggled to find his words, his voice cracking slightly as he finally spoke. Because I see myself in you, Kelly. I see that pain and it scares me. Kelly froze, her chest still heaving as she stared at him. What? She whispered. Tim swallowed hard. I see that pain, and it reminds me of how I felt when I was younger, how lost I was, how angry I was. And I guess I thought if I could convince you to move past it, maybe I could convince myself that I already had. His admission hung heavy in the air, dissolving the anger that had filled the space moments before. Kelly's expression softened slightly as she leaned forward. Tim, what are you saying? He took a shaky breath. I'm saying that maybe I haven't moved past it as much as I thought I had. Maybe I've just gotten really good at pretending it doesn't hurt anymore. Kelly's anger gave way to empathy as she sank back into her seat. So you attacked me because you're not as healed as you want everyone to think you are? She asked gently. Tim lowered his gaze, his voice barely audible. I attacked you because seeing your pain reminded me of my own, and I couldn't handle it. I thought if I could make you stop talking about it, maybe I wouldn't have to face the fact that I'm still that little boy wondering why his father couldn't love him enough to stay. Kelly's voice softened. Tim, that's not how healing works. He nodded slowly, finally meeting her eyes. I know that. I do. But for a moment there, I thought if I could be harsh enough, tough enough, maybe I could shock you into becoming the person I wish I could be. Kelly tilted her head slightly. And what person is that? She asked. His reply came in a fragile whisper. Someone who doesn't still wake up some mornings feeling like that abandoned kid. Someone who doesn't still question whether they're worthy of love, even after all the success, all the years of trying. Kelly reached across the table and gently took his hand. Tim, she said softly, you just described exactly how I feel. That's why I talk about it, not to stay stuck, but to remind people they're not alone in feeling stuck sometimes. Tim looked at their joined hands, his voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry, Kelly. Everything I said, it was wrong, it was cruel, it was fear, not wisdom. Kelly gave him a small, understanding smile. I know, and I'm sorry too. Tim looked confused. What could you possibly be sorry for? Kelly squeezed his hand. For triggering something in you that you weren't ready to face. For making you feel like you had to defend yourself against emotions you thought you'd conquered. Tim shook his head. That's not your fault. That's mine. I should have been honest about where I was coming from instead of lashing out. Kelly nodded softly. We're both just trying to figure it out, aren't we? How to be whole, people despite the pieces that broke when we were too young to protect ourselves. Tim's voice cracked as he whispered. Yeah, we are. For a long moment they sat in silence, the air thick with shared vulnerability. Finally, Kelly spoke again, her tone reflective. You know what I think? Maybe the reason we both became performers, people who share our stories with the world, is because we're still trying to prove we're worth staying for. We're still trying to earn the love we didn't get when we needed it most. Tim nodded, his eyes glistening. That's probably true, he admitted. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's not something to be ashamed of. Maybe it's not, Kelly agreed. Maybe it's just part of who we are. And instead of fighting it or judging it, we accept it and use it to help others feel less alone. Tim looked at her with newfound respect. "You're a lot stronger than I gave you credit for," he said softly. Kelly smiled faintly. "No, Tim. I'm exactly as strong as you gave me credit for. You just forgot that strength doesn't mean you never break. It means you keep going even when you do." Tim squeezed her hand, his voice steady now. "I'll remember that." Kelly smiled gently. "Good, because I have a feeling we're both going to need to remember it." As the cameras continued to roll, the studio was filled with a heavy, sacred silence. Both artists sat in the aftermath of their emotional battle, forever changed by the honesty they had been forced to face. What began as a conversation about an album had transformed into a profound moment of reckoning, a raw exploration of how childhood wounds shape adult lives, and how sometimes the people who trigger our deepest pain are the ones who help us understand it best. The silence between them was no longer tense but peaceful, two souls sitting in the quiet truth of shared humanity. Healing, they both realized, isn't about forgetting the past. It's about learning to carry it with grace,